With season 2 of The Last of Us almost here, I wanted to take the time to talk about how good of an adaptation season 1 really was. Not that that's a new revelation by any means, but I recently rewatched season 1 in preparation for season 2, and I was really blown away by the storytelling in that season. And that's coming from someone who absolutely loved watching the first season as it was airing back in 2023. But I think I was more impressed with my second viewing of the show, since this time around, I was viewing it without having played the video game in a few years. You see, I grew up as an Xbox fan, so I never played any PlayStation games until I finally got a PS5 back in 2022. And since the first season was right around the corner, I knew The Last of Us had to be one of the first video games that I played. And I loved it, obviously. Easily one of the best video games that I ever played in my entire life. But I constantly had that in the back of my mind as I was watching season 1 of the adaptation. So I couldn't help but to compare the two projects. And while season 1 of The Last of Us was admittedly impressive, it did prove to be a good show in and of itself. I was just far more impressed with the video game as a whole. After all, The Last of Us completely redefined what video games could be. It elevated the medium and showed people that video games could be true cinematic pieces of art. It proved that video games could have depth, that they could tell rich stories with flawed and complicated characters, that they could successfully incorporate weighty themes and raise interesting moral, ethical, or philosophical questions that people still debate about to this day. It forever changed the way people perceived video games and how video games were developed in general. By comparison, the HBO series was just a really good adaptation, which is an undeniably positive compliment, especially for a video game adaptation, but the show could never do the same thing for HBO dramas as the video game did for the gaming industry as a whole. That doesn't take away from how good the show is, but that was freshly on my mind as I was watching the show for the very first time. Fast forward a couple of years later, and season 2 of the series is quickly approaching. I want to re-experience the story of the first game leading up to the new season, but I definitely don't have the time to replay The Last of Us. So I watched the first season of The Last of Us on its own, and it was just so fantastic. I did feel like I was re-experiencing the heart and soul of the video game without needing to play through the entire campaign all over again. And I really wish more video game adaptations were like this. Because as much as I would love to be able to replay older games like Halo or Fable or Splinter Cell again, I simply do not have the time in my adult life. Especially since I barely find the time to play newer games that I've missed out on. So having a good and faithful adaptation of each of these games would really be a dream come true for me. And what makes The Last of Us adaptation even more special is the fact that it does take some big liberties with the story, even in spite of how faithful it actually is. These liberties not only strengthen the themes of the story, but they also allow the show to stand on its own 2 feet. So if you've never played the video game before, you'll be satisfied with watching The Last of Us as its own unique experience. And if you have played the video game before, then you'll be happy to see how well the game has been translated into a TV series. Of course, it'll be interesting to see if the same can be said about the second season, especially since I'm currently playing The Last of Us Part 2, and I happen to really enjoy it. Yes, despite how negative some fans may have been on the sequel, I can't deny that I've personally been having a lot of fun with it. It is easily one of the most immersive, cinematic, mature, emotional, powerful, and narratively complex video games that I've ever played in my entire life, so I don't see how I personally wouldn't be able to enjoy it. But it's also one of the longest games that I've ever played in my entire life, so I think it was a smart move to split the story of the video game over the course of several seasons of the show. Though we'll see how that story will play out once the new season gets released on April 13th. Either way, regardless of how the quality of the future seasons will turn out to be, I can't deny that the first season of The Last of Us is an absolutely spectacular season of television, period. It features great performances, complex storytelling, mature themes, outstanding visual effects, and it perfectly captures the essence of its video game counterpart. So I don't care what any hater has to say about it. Pedro Pascal does a fantastic job of playing Joel, Bella Ramsey does a phenomenal job of portraying Ellie, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what these two actors are going to bring to the next part of their characters' respective journeys. Which means, if you couldn't already tell by the tone of this video, the first season of The Last of Us would definitely get a recommendation from me. And I appreciate anyone who took the time to hear my thoughts on this season, so as always, thanks for watching.